All right, folks, today's show is going to take on a bit of a serious tone because this next story deserves careful consideration. But don't worry, I'll still sprinkle in some of my signature Jeff Adams flair. Because if we can't talk about difficult things with a little humanity, then what are we doing here? Let's dive into the allegations involving Dr. Michael Brown, a man who has been a leader in ministry for decades and is now facing accusations that have resurfaced from over 23 years ago. So, here's what we know. A recent article from the Roy's Report brought forward accusations from a woman identified only as Erin, who worked with Dr. Brown at the Fire School of Ministry back in the early 2000s. She claims that their interactions made her uncomfortable. And now, all these years later, this story is making headlines. Dr. Brown, for his part, hasn't shied away from addressing this. He's publicly stated that neither he nor his wife, Nancy, had any idea that this woman still carried pain from their interactions. And, you know, he's admitted that some of his actions back then were foolish and lacked judgment, but he categorically denies any sexual or amorous misconduct. Now, let me pause here for a second. This is the kind of story that makes me stop and go, really? This is how we're handling things now? Look, I get it. Accountability matters, but there's a way to do it without turning it into a public spectacle. I mean, does airing this out in an online article really help anyone? Or is it just clickbait dressed up as journalism? You tell me. Dr. Brown didn't dance around the issue. He's owning up to his mistakes, saying he acted foolishly and irresponsibly, even if his intentions weren't inappropriate. He even points out that back in 2002, when Erin initially brought this up, he and Nancy sat down with her, apologized, and thought the matter was resolved. And here's the kicker. After that meeting, Erin stayed in contact with them for years. We're talking about emails, prayer requests, family updates, the whole 9 yards. So how are they supposed to know she still had unresolved feelings about this? This isn't just a case of two sides to every story. This is more like one of those 1,000-piece puzzles where half the pieces are missing. What really stood out to me, though, is how Dr. Brown handled the spiritual side of this. He brought up Matthew 18, where Jesus talks about going directly to a person if there's an issue. But instead of being given the chance to do that, he says he found out about Erin's continued discomfort through the Roy's Report article. Now, call me old-fashioned, but shouldn't we be handling these things the biblical way, especially if we're talking about people in ministry? You know, sit down, talk it out, try to bring some healing. Instead, it's like we've decided that social media and blogs are the new confessional booths. And honestly, that just feels wrong on so many levels. To his credit, Dr. Brown has made it clear that his main priority is healing. He's publicly apologized, asked for forgiveness, and even said he'd welcome a meeting with Erin to bring closure and restoration. He's not running from this. He's leaning into it, which, you know, says a lot about his character. And listen, if this woman has been carrying this pain for 23 years, that's heartbreaking. Nobody should have to live with that kind of hurt. But here's the thing. How do we find a resolution when the process gets hijacked by public spectacle? That's the real question here. So, what do we take away from this? First, nobody's perfect, not even leaders in ministry. Dr. Brown admitted his mistakes, and he's doing what he can to make it right. Second, there's a way to handle conflict that builds bridges instead of tearing people apart. And finally, maybe, just maybe, we should all take a step back before turning sensitive situations into clickbait fodder. Let's keep everyone involved in this situation. Dr. Brown, his wife Nancy, and Erin in our prayers. Healing isn't easy, but it's worth pursuing, especially when the stakes are this high. Thanks for tuning into The Jeff Adams Show. Let's keep it real, keep it classy, and as always, keep the conversation going. See you next time.